piece that it's us behind like the logo. So maybe you should have waited a couple more, but content the audience comes for watching, buddy.
Right? Okay, we're good.
All right, it's live. All right, I'm positioning us live. Faces are live on the stream now. Hello, welcome to Derms Talk About Games. I'm your co-host, Mango.
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
And today we're joined by a very special guest, a friend of the podcast, Zhao, who is the man behind the social media accounts in several ways. But he's come on for a very special reason. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about Marvel Presents Mists of Pandaria. But before we do that, buddy, you want to tell the folks at home what it is we do on this podcast?
Well, on this podcast, we like to talk about games, but obviously we also talk about Marvel movies since we've done literally all the Marvel movies up at this point, right? We have these huge lists with like the rankings that like update dynamically over time. I'm sure we'll get to those lists towards the end of the review.
I will point out the reason we generated those lists was specifically for as a request by one Zhao.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, actually, Zhao is the one who requested us to do a full accounting of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So I guess we're just gonna have to continue in that trend. So today we're talking about Shang-Chi, which came out a couple weeks ago at this point, but we had like a ton of stuff going on, so we didn't actually get to it. I just saw it like last night at like the 10:45 showing. I was like, oh shit, I gotta see Shang-Chi.
Shang-Chi and Legend of the Five Rings. As per standard, we'll give our baseline impressions before the spoilers. So I know that the three of us have different opinions on this. So let's start with you, buddy.
I think I famously said that movie was dog shit. That's what I said in like our group chat. Immediately after the movie finished, I wrote that movie was dog shit. That was a joke. Yeah, like that's like mostly a joke, right? I think Shang-Chi has some stuff going for it. Most notably, the action is really well done, and I was pretty impressed, actually. I want to say, especially for Marvel movies, which have, I've got back and forth on. Some of them I think have good action, some I think have, some of them I think have bad action. It's probably not the worst of the Marvel movies, but it's pretty bad. It reminds me quite a lot of Captain Marvel, actually, in terms of being right. Like it has a lot of the same problems that we identified with Captain Marvel, just sort of like repeated over again. And then like a smattering of just sort of like other stuff. I'm sure there are plenty of people who, part of this is that this is maybe the most bathos heavy of any of the Marvel movies. Like, boy, oh boy, does it go hard on that kind of humor, which really got on my nerves. And so this might be one of those situations where like this one was really kind of tailor-made to piss me off. But yeah, so I'm not a big fan of Shang-Chi.
All right, I'll go next. I thought it was all right. I don't think it was as hype as some of like the media treatments I saw it getting was. I enjoyed it a bit. I think it has some major flaws. Some things that just stuck out to me is like these might trip your kind of like, you're nitpicking too much stuff, but we'll get into that in the spoiler section. To your point, I don't think it was the most bathos heavy. I think that maybe like to me, the one that stands out clear to me that is like Thor Ragnarok, but I think it's got the most bathos with bad jokes.
Okay, so here's my thing about that. I think I might agree that Thor Ragnarok has more bathos, but the contrast is not as bad. The thing about Shang-Chi is that it was constantly asking me to take its melodrama incredibly seriously, like super sincerely, right? And putting that like super melodrama up against bathos humor makes for a greater sort of disruptive effect
Greater
versus
dissonance.
Thor versus Thor Ragnarok, which like Thor Ragnarok had a point, it had themes, it had characters, and I did take those characters seriously or whatever, but like its overall tone was skewed much more comedic in general. So even though there's more bathos, it's less dissonant
Yeah,
than what happened with
and
Shang-Chi for
I think
sure.
this rolls into my next thing, right? Like Thor Ragnarok was, um, was Taiki Waititi, right? Like it was
Yeah.
Marvel does a Taiki Waititi movie, whereas this is like Marvel does a Wuxia movie. And
Mhm.
Wuxia does not it's not generally light in a lot of ways. You know, there's a couple of notable exceptions, but those are like humor movies, and this was not that. Um,
Yep. Yeah, I also just think that some of the jokes were insanely poorly placed. I
yes,
was just like completely baffled. I was like,
it was.
why on earth are we interrupting this thing for a dumb like bit? I want to die. But
Yeah.
hey, that's just me, I guess.
But I think I'd agree with you. I think the action was pretty good. I was not impressed with either Simu Liu or Aquafina as actors in this movie. But I was impressed with I don't know the actor's name, but the guy who
The
played the
villain.
father.
Yep,
Um,
he was great.
yeah,
Everybody else sucked, I thought. Actually, the sister was okay, but
yeah.
the rest of the main cast I didn't enjoy.
But yeah, so that would be my kind of initial thoughts. Zhao, what are your initial thoughts?
I thought it was good. I mean, like, so it before this one, the last movie I'd seen that was a Marvel movie was it Black Widow? And I thought
Okay.
that one was just like extremely. I thought that was like I don't know, that was very average for a Marvel movie, and it just started. I would understand like not liking that one in particular. Then again, I also enjoyed Free Guy because I could turn off my brain for that, so maybe that's something you couldn't
I mean,
do.
I didn't love Black Widow. I said Black Widow was the top. It's like the top end of like the average, mediocre, forgettable Marvel movies, right? You
Well, so
know.
so for me, I think that like Shang-Chi was just it was different than most other Marvel movies. I think I like the ones that are like more out there. So I
Mhm.
do like Thor Ragnarok. I This obviously has way less pathos than Thor Ragnarok because the entirety of Thor, like that movie ends with like an extreme anticlimax that it like spoils that trailer. I think this one was fine. I don't think like yes, there was the kind of Marvel humor that Buddy doesn't like, extremely so in at least like a couple of scenes. But I think overall, like I think they kind of separated out where like they treated the parts that were like mostly the interaction between like Shang-Chi and like the dad character was his what did they make him, not Fu Manchu, Wenwu.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
um
Wenwu, yeah.
so I think they treated those parts pretty seriously, and then like the rest of the movie it's like I could like if it's bad it's bad, but most of it I think was generally good.
Yeah, I do want to clarify like that there's a difference. Like there are some movies that I like more than they are good, and some movies that I think are bad more than I hate them or whatever, right? Like, certain movies I don't like them because they grind my gears, even if I think it's overall a pretty good film. It's just the kind of thing that really pisses me off or whatever. That is not what's going on in Shang-Chi. I actually thought it might be at first. Um, because I was just like, God, Aquafina is just gonna ruin this fucking movie for me. I had that thought, right? But I eventually sort of realized that I think the problems were a little bit more deeper and on like a structural level when it comes to like Shang-Chi's character and like the character arcs and the way that the film delivered its exposition and advanced the plot. I thought that stuff, which is normally pretty clean from a Marvel movie, I thought that stuff was a little bit messy, which we have seen before, right? Like, there's the same kind of problem with Captain Marvel, right? She just doesn't have an arc, and I don't think Shang-Chi does either. Which is like, that's to me, that's a real core issue that makes a bad movie, right?
All right,
I mean, I disagree. I think that he does have an arc.
We can talk about the
I was
specifics
Yeah.
of
gonna
this
say
past
this sounds
spoilers,
like
I'm
we
sure.
should roll into the spoiler part, but it's kind of like a bottom line. I'd give a soft recommend. Like for comparison, I say I like this movie a lot better than Black Widow. How about you guys?
Wow. Definitely like it worse than Black Widow. I would not recommend Shang-Chi, I guess. Or
I
if I would, with the heavy caveat of like the action is fun and there's 20 minutes of it, so try and find it on YouTube or something.
I mean, I would recommend it. It's basically like whether I would watch the movie again, and there's like a decent number of like Marvel movies I would just never recommend watching again. And they range from like, around Captain Marvel to like Thor's 1 and 2. Um, which why were they made? But then some I would just be willing to, like this one I would be like, do you want to watch it again? Like, yeah, sure. I think that the action is good. I think that the core plot element is something uh that was not so much hard to nail, but it was well executed. And then, unlike in Black Widow, which I can contrast later, but like I think that there is a plot that is interesting, among the many plots, some of which don't go anywhere. But I think it's worth watching just like as a rewatch.
I mean, I think that might be part of my issue, right? Like, there's like plots that don't go anywhere might be kind of part of my frustration because really what I was trying to grab onto at first, I felt like this. I was with the
Real
movie.
quick, let me
Sure.
give the
Let's just
spoiler
go into
warning.
spoilers.
Yeah.
Oh,
Here's
yeah,
your,
yeah, yeah,
here's your spoiler warning. If you haven't seen the movie and you'd like to see the movie without being spoiled, hold off on watching the rest of this cast. Go catch it on YouTube or on the podcast format. All right, buddy, what were you saying?
Okay, so like I this was not something that lost me immediately, right? Like I was pretty on board. I thought the first fight was fun. I actually really liked the whole setup, right? Like with his sort of freewheeling, I'm having fun valet life in San Francisco. All of that I was absolutely on board for. I was like, okay, cool. This is a pretty sweet premise, right? And then it starts to go downhill when he flies to Macau to go see his sister, and then it just like kind of deteriorates over time from there, right? Including like I said, I think the best action is that first bus fight scene. I think that that's the one that's most dynamic. It's the one that's the most fun and interesting and kind of has like stakes and I don't know, just like I think that scenario, whoever was in the room pitching, right? Like, oh, they're on this bus and there's this guy and he's cutting the bus up with his lightsaber hand. It's not a lightsaber, but it cuts through everything like a lightsaber, like all that. Like I think that was great, right? And it just kind of slowly kind of like each additional one is just a little less cool than the one that preceded it, right? And eventually you just kind of get to this point of where it just feels like the whole movie has unraveled by the ending and I'm just completely lost, right? I think part of this is also just on they brought I was like, Aquafina is the perfect kind of character to leave in the first act, right? She is the representation of Shang-Chi's whatever freewheeling lifestyle, and he is going to return to her at the end of the movie and tell her about his crazy fucking adventures or whatever, sure. But just like the fact that she was tagging along at every step of the way, making these incredibly just like, oh my god, I wanted to die. It was terrible, right? Um, but I think that a big part of that is also just that like even though Shang-Chi himself has a really solid kind of premise as a character, he doesn't go anywhere interesting. He doesn't change over the course of the movie in a way that I felt was compelling or interesting or even just kind of like like I mean, I'm gonna make a zillion comparisons to Aquaman, so let's just start now, right? Like one of the things I've said about Aquaman in the past is that it's a very simple story, right? Like we've seen that story a gazillion times. It's the King Arthur story, right? And it has existed since the medieval era or whatever. I don't think you need to do anything incredibly complex or nuanced with Shang-Chi. You can just tell a pretty basic Saturday morning cartoon version of the superhero story, and I would be okay with it. But that just wasn't there, and it seems like the place where he was and the stuff that he pays off at the end of the movie has absolutely nothing to do with his actions and decisions at the beginning of the movie, which doesn't create a character arc, right? So I guess that's my core foundational, you know, opinion about Shang-Chi.
Yeah, so
I mean, I think that.
you
Sorry,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, you go first.
I think that so where I see the arc is, and I think the difficulty here is that a lot of the arc was done not when you saw Shang-Chi as Simu Liu, but when you saw like the younger versions in the flashbacks. And I know that, in the group chat we discussed like, but he does not like the flashbacks.
Yeah, I have.
Um,
Yeah, we'll talk about the flashbacks, I'm
but I
sure.
think the flashbacks like do two very clear stories, right? They establish like Wembu's story of being like I guess like a guy who attacks a fort in the desert, and I'm not sure why, to being like, oh no, I have met this nice woman, and then giving that up, and then eventually she gets killed, and then that leads him to like returning to just being like a bad guy again. And then similarly for I think like Shang-Chi's character, it shows like from the start where he's just like an innocent kid who's traumatized by his mom's death, and then he's taken with his father to like take revenge, and he decides that that's what he wants to do. And then I think there's that ultimate conversation before they try to go into his mother's village, where he mentions that he had done it, and then he realized that he felt bad about it, and so that's where his character arc is there. And then with regards to his actual village, I think part of it was like one, finding like a connection to his mom again, because he explicitly asked Michelle Yeoh's character for the uh, learning how to be like fight like his mom, and that pays off at the fight with his dad, because he uses both that power and what his dad had taught him to like unite that into becoming like better, and then being able to take the rings more or less. And then that's also when the dad's character arc closes, because he is like through this entire thing blinded by like wanting to get his wife back, and then at the last moment saves his son. So I think that like there's a clear arc between those two characters. Like I don't really care if Aquafina is like in it or not. I don't see like why like I don't know why everybody was so pissed at her like being there. Like
I don't know.
I,
It's
I
just
guess that's just like a
I found her.
style that he doesn't like. But like I don't know. Like I think
I
most
think
of
I
everything
said
else is fine.
Steve Urkeling. I said she was Steve Urkeling the entire time, which is just this like, I don't know. It's this very like mugging for the camera, right? Like over the top. Ah,
Yeah, but I think it was fine, because so Steve Urkeling also requires like the did I do that kind of component to it, right? Like if she was like actively and deliberately like fucking things up, I could understand being like, mad at that character. I'm trying to think of a character that would be similar, and
I don't know, because like I think you can have like a comedy character, like you can have a character that is comedic and fun or
yeah.
whatever, but they just have to, this is sort of like the um Marcy from the Thor movies. She's in Thor 2, and it's the same kind of thing, right? Like she's only in there to do comedy, and she's constantly around like butting into the drama, and just like that stuff is always gonna sort of like grate on me. And I think there might just be something about like the brand of humor that Aquafina herself is like. Maybe it's just like that loud, obnoxious something is also a piece of the puzzle, but I don't know. That's like its own thing. My thing with the flashbacks is that like I don't think you can tell a character arc in a flashback, right? I think a flashback can be a useful tool in an ongoing character arc in the sense of the story, right? But if I think of, for instance, Star Wars, right? Anakin doesn't have a character arc in the original trilogy, right? His character arc all happens in the backstory, right? And he is Darth Vader, and Darth Vader has a character arc, but like the arc that we see in the prequels only happens in the prequels while we are watching the prequels, if that makes sense. Even though it is part of the backstory that we get told in the original trilogy. Does that make sense? Like
I don't know. I
because
don't know if I agree with that, right? Because like Vader arcs across all 6 movies, right? Like, and it's told
so
backwards.
okay, yeah, so I want to just draw a distinction. When I say Anakin, I mean literally Anakin, right? Like
Okay,
there's a dividing line between 3 and 4 where he stops being
sure.
Anakin, becomes Darth Vader, right? Darth Vader has an arc over the course of the original trilogy that is playing out in real time, right? But we learn Anakin's backstory, right, where he was a Jedi and he's seduced by the dark side, and he kills
No,
himself or whatever. Obi-Wan says that is a character arc that is being described to us as a part of his backstory,
I
right?
don't
It's
think.
not in
Well,
flashbacks, but it's described to us as part of his backstory. That's not a character arc that plays out on screen, and
I
it
think it
doesn't like
does.
No, no,
count in the way that
Wait,
Shang-Chi
wait, no.
would want it
That's
to.
very so. I can understand for like the first of the Star Wars movies where the arc doesn't get played out, right? Because like it's a child actor who you really can't do much when it's just like
No,
here's the movie where you discover Anakin. But I think in episodes 2 and 3, it definitely plays out actually on screen,
No,
right?
that's what I'm saying. I'm saying if I'm looking at episodes 4, 5, and 6, right, and I hear the backstory, Anakin Skywalker, was a Jedi, but he turned to the dark side. That describes a character arc. A character arc was with the light side, and then he betrayed them, right? In the backstory. That's not a character arc that plays out on screen. And so it doesn't like count towards being a character arc in the
So the
same way that I don't think that
flashbacks do play
Shang-Chi's
out on
flash
screen.
peaks.
That's the thing,
yeah.
right?
But I don't think
So
So there
like,
are small parts that don't, but like flashbacks are literally like they
I
film
think I agree
things.
with Zhao on this one, right? Because like you're right about Vader, right? Like we're just told that he used to be a good guy, right?
sure.
Like Ben just says that to us, but like the flashbacks actually happen, right? Like you see child Shang-Chi train, we see him lose his mother, right? We see all of that, and like, I'm not like his character is like at a certain point in the like he still goes through like the arc from like accepting, from being like recalcitrant to like accepting who he is, and like, ultimately kind of accepting that he's a son of his parents, but he's not beholden to them, and he's not necessarily beholden to the entirety of his past or whatever, which is like, I think roughly what his arc is.
I think the best arc you can make at like the Steelman case for Shang-Chi's character arc is that he was reclusive and now he is participating in, this world and his destiny and all this other sort of stuff, right?
So
I think that that's pretty weak overall, right? Like
no, I don't think that's the because the Steelman case is you include the flashbacks as part of his character arc.
No,
I don't think he changes though. I don't think the flashbacks change his character. Fundamentally, the person he is on the bus is more or less the exact same as the person he is in the village.
I think
right?
this is dependent on what you qualify as the plot of the movie, right? Because you're considering the flashbacks to be not part of the plot, but given that like how far back like at the intro of the movie starts with like the dad character, I think like with Wenwu, I think it's like pretty clear that like the flashbacks are like it's just the plot told non-linearly, right? So like it's not as if the flashbacks are not part of his arc because the character's arc starts more or less and the first time you're actually introduced to Shang-Chi is when he was a kid, right? Like when he was introduced as a kid, because it goes from like his mom telling that story, you see him as a kid, and then it cuts to the modern day. And then it like, it will alternate between those like him being like in the modern day and then his explaining it, but also it's being shown not as like him just talking, but also with what actually happened, right?
So I think his character starts essentially on the bus, right? Or before the bus, right? The start of Shang-Chi's character for the over the course of the movie starts in San Francisco. He is a valet, right?
I think
And
that's so
then he ends, wearing the dragon scale and riding this dragon and fighting his dad and all this other sort of stuff, right? Which is why I think that the best character arc case you can make is that this is someone who is disengaged from the world, who has then become engaged by it. But I think that even that as his arc, that's an arc that takes place over the course of a single scene, because by the time he's on the bus, he's already willing to jump on a plane to fucking Macau, right? Like he has that recalcitrance to getting involved in all of this fades away immediately, and he just immediately is a part of the action, right? Which on one hand,
I think the piece that you're missing here, buddy, is it's not necessarily his recalcitrance to engage with anything. It's his recalcitrance to like embrace who he is, right? Like it's supposed to be personal, and I will agree with you insofar as like I think the arc conceptually is fine, but I don't think it's very well executed, right? Like I think he doesn't have enough time to like fully develop all of this. And I think Wenwu gets a much better character arc. Like I think Wenwu's arc is much better and much better serviced by the plot.
I would also argue that Wenwu's arc is not an arc. Wenwu's arc is also told in the backstory. Like I think he's a really compelling character.
What do you count as the backstory? That's the thing. Because the movie starts with Wenwu as like when he originally gets the rings, right?
Like to Zhao's point, if we took all the scenes in this movie and put him in chronological order, right, with that some like that, like you would have an arc for Wenwu, right? Like does it not count because like it's rearranged slightly?
Yeah, well, yeah, actually. I mean, that's my philosophy. Yeah. Well, the start of the movie, Wenwu is dedicated to finding the village, opening the gate. The end of the movie, that's exactly what he's dedicated to until literally his dying breath, right? I mean, there is backstory to explain how he got to that point, and I think that backstory is really interesting, and that makes him a compelling character. I'm definitely on board for all of that piece of it, right? But that is not a character arc playing out in front of my eyes. That is me learning information about his backstory.
You don't know about the village thing until about like the midpoint of the movie, right? Like you don't know about it. Like
no, sure, and that's what I mean, right? Like that is a flashback that explains the motivation of his character, right? But his character, which starts by sending assassins after his son on a bus in San Francisco.
No, his character starts by attacking like a fort in like ancient China with his rings to demonstrate who he is as a character.
So I think that's expositional, like that. Like that's not part of.
What does that mean?
It's just like not part of the active plot of the story of Shang-Chi, which is about his dad trying to open this gate with like the Great Devourer or whatever on the other side, right? Like that stuff is, there's a lot of other stuff that's there that's not a part of that, and that's backstory. It's all exposition. You have to learn that stuff in order to understand like the core conflict at play. But the core conflict of this story is Shang-Chi has to stop his dad from opening that fucking gate, right?
I mean, so then are you saying, like, let's go back to your favorite movie, Man of Steel? Does it not
Sure.
start until Zod shows up? Like the rest of that before that is just expositional plot. Because none of
Uh,
that, because
well,
like sequentially it's about the same, right? Because it's essentially like more or less explanatory flashbacks, or just like here's established backstory for expositional backstory for Clark Kent. So I don't understand like what makes that different than this.
no, so actually that is pretty similar. So there's a couple of things. One, Man of Steel exists like so a lot of superhero origin movies will do this, right, where the inciting incident actually takes quite a while. Most movies it's going to happen in the first 10 or 15 minutes, right? But there are some movies where it'll take quite a while for that inciting incident to show up, and for Man of Steel the inciting incident is like technically, Jor-El sending Clark and that stuff. But like really the plot ramps up at that midpoint when Zod shows up. And the thing that carries it through that middle part is that the character who gets an arc is Lois, not Clark, right? Lois is the one who is learning about Clark, and he changes her mind about him and his mission, right? And this is kind of in the beginning of the second act of that movie, right? And he changes her mind about that mission, and then Zod shows up, and you kind of catapult into that story from there. Whereas with Shang-Chi, there is no other character who gets an arc besides Aquafina, and her arc is completely unrelated to any of this.
Also, her arc is backwards. Like she
Wait, what is her?
like she very clearly has like a skill that she can hone, which is driving, which she uses very effectively in the bus scene and in the forest scene. And then they like give her a bow and be like, do archery, and it's stupid. I hate it.
You're actually really right about that. I didn't even notice that, but that's 100% true, actually. Wow.
What Mango really wanted was a Fast and the Furious style ending where
That's what I
Aquafina's
want.
character drives a car into the dragon.
Like the obvious way to do this is like she tries with is something like she picks up the bow.
She drives another dragon into
No,
the first dragon.
But like she picks up the bow because she wants to contribute, but it's like her trying something new and it doesn't quite work. And like then like her big moment isn't her shooting the dragon, it's her doing something with the car, right? Because that's what she's.
Oh,
good
it's
at.
her getting in one of the cars and being like, "Yeah, actually, yeah, I think that's very real. You're correct."
But like, I mean, that's just a single thing that there's a little bunch of little things that annoy me about this movie that again I think get into nitpicky bullshit territory. But I do want to come back to this kind of out of order thing just for a minute because like the thing that pops into my head is like this by counterexample. Any movie that starts in media res, right? Like, let's take the very cheesy example of like the 90s movie where like, starts in media res, freeze frame. I bet you want, like Sonic, right? Like that's the easy one, right? Like does like any movie that start like that not have an arc because like it technically starts like 10 minutes before the end of the movie?
No, I wouldn't say so, right? But it's about like where the bulk of the like where the bulk of the narrative is taking place, right? Sonic, that freeze frame happens right at the beginning, and that's just like a teaser. That just kind of like wets your beak a little, right? And then it proceeds pretty linearly from that point, right? Or another version of this might be like Batman Begins is also pretty like a similar movie with a bunch of flashbacks in between. Those flashbacks, you start with Bruce Wayne as Batman, and then you kind of go back and you watch his training play out. And the training is told more or less linearly, right?
Sure.
Straight from one end to the other. And so the way that I feel like it works when it comes to is it's just kind of about like where am I spending my time. And by the way, I also think that you can do the version of the things where like you are learning information through flashback. The example I gave here was Black Panther, though I might be misremembering. We talked about this in the group chat. Maybe there was, I thought there was a second flashback to the Oakland house or whatever. But so
I think
in
that
Black
was
Panther,
the thing there is that it had extra. It wasn't a true flashback, right? It was somebody
that
else.
was, I think, him taking the like Killmonger taking the heart
okay, yeah,
shade
you might
herb
be,
and then
yeah, okay.
going back to
So
that as like a scene.
So in the story of Black Panther, right, it starts in Oakland, and then eventually later in the movie we revisit that Oakland scene where they are in Oakland, and T'Challa learns more about that interaction that fuels his character development, right? It changes the way that he is going to act and behave because he learns some new information, and that causes him, I mean, that's the story about synthesis, right? Like his dad is Thesis, Killmonger is antithesis, and he has to kind of make a synthesis out of them. He has to combine pieces of both of their view to make like the better version. And that's the moment that he realizes, actually, I shouldn't be defending my dad because he made a poor decision leaving, little baby cousin Killmonger in the streets of Oakland, California, instead of welcoming him into the family like he should have done, right? That is a piece of a flashback that's a piece of a character arc. I also don't think that every flashback has to be a piece of a character arc, right? There's a bunch of flashbacks in a ton of movies that are just there to explain a little aspect of the backstory, and that's totally fine. My thing with Shang-Chi is that there are constant flashbacks. It's like every couple of scenes there is another flashback to this thing, which is explaining way more exposition. And and because none of those things are interacting with the current character arc, right? In the current timeline of the story that we're watching, it just felt like it was dragging the narrative down because nothing was actually changing based on the flashbacks themselves. Does that make sense?
No, I don't think they necessarily didn't change, right? Like I think the starting scene, if you call that like a flashback more or less, like that establishes both Wenwu as a character and I guess like the mom as a character a little bit. I think the three major flashback sequences, three or four. So one flashback sequence was kid Shang-Chi training to like by like punching like a wooden pole and then
Mhm.
being better than the assassin. So that establishes where where he can do that stuff. Then there's related one, I think once they get to the sister's place where that flashback establishes why her sister can also, like I think her sister beats him in like a fight, right? And then the other two are just how the mom dies, which also has a small other flashback about, right after the death, what did the dad do? And I think they were just placed sequentially next to it, like major parts for the different like characters, right? Like, because like the what the dad did after seeing the mom die was like right after he had explained that he's going to the village to try to open it up for the plot. And then the last thing that you're introduced to as a flashback is basically seeing Shang-Chi as like a teenager go off and then immediately cutting to Shang-Chi as an adult explaining that he had like done the thing, but was not proud of what he had done. So I
Right.
don't think
I think the operative word in all of those is why, right? This is explaining why X, Y, and Z, things happen, right? That's the expositional part of it. They're explaining Shang-Chi's backstory, Wen, what's her name? The sister's backstory, you know, Wen Wu's backstory. They're explaining all of these people's backstory and explaining kind of how we got to the plot that we got
yep.
here. But the plot that we got here is told pretty linearly, and there's not a lot of change or growth over the course of it, outside of Aquafina and Shang-Chi's kind of muddled arc. Like, frankly, a version of things that I would have been very interested to see is a version of things that is told straight to forward, right? I think it is kind of interesting that there is that there is that story of Shang-Chi where he is he is a kid and he's training, and he has to go on this mission, and he does go and do an evil thing. He commits this murder, and that's the catalyst for him sort of withdrawing from the world, and he needs to take responsibility for that action and put a stop to his fight. Like, that's a complete character arc, right? But you can't do that with these weird flashbacks, and you can't do it with like the main event of that, him killing a guy. It doesn't even happen on screen, right? Like, it happens completely off camera, right? I think that's like my core frustration, I guess, is I don't know. Yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, but in that case, even if that had happened on screen, right? Like, um, what what would have been different than just him saying he was like ashamed? Like you see like teenage Shang-Chi like dibbity stab somebody and then just like look upset and then like run away and hide that
Well, I mean,
space.
I do think he needs to
Then you would
suffer
still
some
need
real
to explain that, right? Like the
No,
character would still have.
I agree. I think he needs to suffer some real like, this is something that that Aquaman does, right? He, in the very beginning of the movie, he inadvertently kills Black Manta's dad in a really convoluted way. We've talked about that, right? But at the end of the day, he essentially kills Black Manta's dad, and then Black Manta swears this, you know, death wish, this like vendetta against him, right? And he attacks him in Italy and almost kills him and Mira, right? And that's the thing that causes Arthur to realize, holy shit, I need to take some responsibility for my actions here, right? Like I'm I'm not taking that responsibility, and it almost led to a bunch of people getting hurt a bunch of innocent people getting hurt, and that's bad, right? And then
Well,
he goes and he visits his mom and he accepts his destiny as the fucking king and all this other
so
stuff, right?
why?
He suffers some real consequences from his poor decision, whereas Shang-Chi in this movie really doesn't.
You know,
Well, I
I
mean,
was I
why?
was expecting the person he killed to have been Aquafina's granddad. Um,
Sure,
Oh,
that
like like
actually was,
that
oh
to be
seemed
my
like
fair,
it was a
yes,
god.
setup, but like it didn't happen, right? So like, and that could have
yeah.
been
I didn't
those
even think about that.
consequences.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I also think that part of that was very lazy in general, right? Like the Iron Gang, just showing up completely out of nowhere, killing the mom or whatever. That stuff is bad, and it's bad in a very direct way, but it's like, it's not
It makes
interestingly
sense.
bad.
It's
It's
just
just,
like it didn't have enough time to like be as like this should have happened over a couple of movies, maybe, right? Like we talked
yeah.
we talked about in the group chat, right? Like Wenwu has the Darth Vader arc in one, like all 6 movies worth of Anakin and Darth Vader in one movie, and you know, and Shang-Chi doesn't have
Yeah.
the chance to do like his Luke thing
And I
essentially.
and I love that backstory for him, and that actor is great. He really sells it. I mean, part of my, I also think the acting is pretty poor in this overall, especially because I think Simu Liu himself is just a very sitcom actor and didn't graduate to
Very stock
movie
photo
acting.
actor.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, he does this thing of I don't even know how to describe it like really accurately, I guess. There's just this like there's this feeling of he's telling a joke that is a sitcom joke. And if Shang-Chi was a sitcom, it would have been perfectly fine, right? Where he just has a one-liner and you kind of like move on. But those things really like clawed at my I was like, like it the place where it really came out was in his dinner, their double date dinner, the very first one, right? Where they're like, you could I just it just really felt like I was watching a bit in a sitcom, but it was a Marvel movie, and those two things, butted against each other. I also think Aquafina has this same problem, so they were kind of ricocheting off one another, but he did not graduate to the big screen in the way that other actors did.
I don't know. I actually can't remember any jokes that Simu actually told during the entirety of the movie. So I'm not sure. Like most of the interruptions, the one that I think you hated the most is probably the airplane scene with like the
Yep,
beef
that
and
was
the
the worst
chicken.
one. That
But
was
that one
the
wasn't him, right? That was like he was playing the straight man in that particular scenario. And then the other one that I think you probably disliked, which I thought was actually fine because it played both into Ben Kingsley's character and also, like whatever, it's like an adorable CGI, like mythical creature. The one where in the middle of the fight, like what's his name? Morris, like
Oh
the
yeah, he
the
comes over and Ben Kingsley is
is like
playing
playing dead.
dead.
Like
Yeah,
otherwise, like
I think all of the stuff with Ben Kingsley was bad, and I would want to cut it. It
I
didn't
y-
feel just. I have a big problem with justification, I guess, in this, which is
Ben Kingsley and Morris feels like C3PO and R2D2 to me, so I think it's kind of forgivable, right? Like because like they're mostly segregated from the plot in a lot of ways, right? Like
Yeah, they basically like I think that was included mostly because they needed to tie up loose ends from Iron Man 3, which, was a movie that probably shouldn't have been made.
yeah. See,
Um
Mike, why did they? I didn't think was real. I was like, why is he in this? Like,
he is
is
in
it
this because
just
he
because they
he
used the name? They had
he
the whole thing that referenced it, and I was like, okay, that's fine, sure. You explain in the backstory why some American businessman appropriates the Ten Rings name for his terrorist cell. Sure, that was
there's
all the
actually a
connection
one
I
shot
needed.
that does also explain this a little more, but I don't expect anyone to have seen it. I only saw it
Oh,
after I saw
really?
this movie. Yeah, it's on Disney Plus if you want to watch it. It's called All Hail the King. It's like 10 minutes. It's actually not bad.
Okay.
Um but yeah, so like I think it was just like they had to tie up this plot, that particular plot.
why?
I,
I don't know
because
what
Kevin
was
Feige cares
untied
about consistency, right?
what
Like
was
But you don't have
untied
to
about
tie. You
that
could
plot.
just say it, right? Like like
Yeah.
I
And it's so weird that they get locked in a cell in a prison, but they just walked around the corner and Ben Kingsley is there and they have this whole conversation with him and he doesn't seem to be a prisoner. He says he's performing for them like a court jester. And I was just like, what the
I mean, but he's
fuck?
clearly like a prisoner, right? Like even if he's like a jester, right?
I don't
Like
know.
first of all,
That
jesters are like
whole section was I felt incredibly
I
confusing.
think it's also fine because it was like a convenient justification for them to find a way into the village with like with
I,
Morris. And then after that, like Ben Kingsley is basically not heard from again, except for like that one comedic scene, right? So I think
Yeah.
it's like whatever. Like it's
Yeah, I think
I am
Ben
amused by
Kingsley
Ben
is.
Kingsley's character.
I think Ben Kingsley character is more forgivable to me than Aquafina's because he is so divorced from anything, right? Like they don't try and arc, his character, right? Like he just like
Yep.
he does acting, and that's the joke, and that's basically it. And like even if it is ultimately severable, I don't think that's a problem, right? Like he just kind of like is.
Yeah, that's a problem of magnitude, right? Like Aquafina is intimately involved in all of the drama of over the course of the movie, and I don't think that she earns that spot as a character. Ben Kingsley is there, but he's not really like an integral part of this. I'm okay in the middle of a big battle scene, cutting to a smaller thing happening that's like, funny or a little bit lighthearted. That's perfectly reasonable in the C3PO R2D2 sense, right? Sure, I'm on board. That's fine. Not a huge deal. But Aquafina, I don't know, she's just this like hanging loose ended that is constantly there. I don't know. I guess I'd like I like Aquafina a little bit more after hearing Mango say that her character arc plays out backwards because she has the driving the bus and the driving the car thing. Because I didn't really piece that together in my head, and I do sort of like that as a moment, even if it is backwards, right? Like fundamentally, and kind of un unsupported by
I
like the
don't know why
rest of
that makes you
everything
like her
else.
more, but
At least it just gives her more of a purpose to be in these scenes, right? Like which is sort of my problem.
you know
Like
what
I don't want to watch a Marvel movie where Steve Urkel keeps butting in, right?
So I think the real thing here is I think Aquafina is there weirdly like they did Shang-Chi as kind of like an Asian American thing, right? Like that's part of this movie, right? And Aquafina is the ABC, right? Like that seems like what they were going for, and it feels weirdly shoehorned. It feels weird.
I
They
mean,
felt like
like
they had to have that character,
Sorry, what is an ABC? Am I just an
American born
idiot?
Chinese.
American-born Chinese, but also
Okay.
like the other thing with her character isn't just that she plays that role, but like she's supposed to be like I guess she's supposed to be like, like a lot of these movies will have a character that exists basically to be like, oh wow, I'm a regular person. And look at all these crazy things that are happening with me, right? Because you can't have that be Shang-Chi because he's also like
The
he suddenly
superhero.
starts like performing extreme martial arts. So he's not going to be like the everyman character essentially that you have, right? And like other movies have that. I think the
Other movies do have that, but they kind of earn their spot better, right?
Oh,
Like
you
I
know
would
what?
I
Is Aquafina supposed to be the Michael Pena of this movie?
Yeah, but Michael Pena is not as
No, I
intimately
agree,
involved in
but
the
like, is
drama.
that what
Oh,
she's
sure.
supposed to be? Right? Like,
I think
Yeah.
Michael Pena is relative. I think actually the closer example would be any of the scientists. Actually, Jane Foster in Thor is probably the closest one.
Sure. See, Jane Foster, I get she's part of the drama and she's like a serious character. Kat
She
Dennings,
doesn't
maybe
really
I would
add
say.
anything to it as like any like she is like a net neutral on the plot more or less. Um which will be changed I guess in the next Marvel movie, but like I think like that's like kind of her role, right? Like to be like kind of like an every person character who has some relation to this and then can otherwise connect like the audience to like the relatively crazy thing that's happening around it. So like
Yeah,
you
I mean,
can
I definitely get that, and I think that I actually don't think you need this to be honest. Like, I don't know. I feel like audiences are fucking smart,
yeah.
and they don't need some Poochie there to fucking like handhold them through this sort of thing. But I feel like the best version of Aquafina is MJ and Ned from the Spider-Man movies. Right? But I think they are earned in the Spider-Man movies because of the kind of teen drama angle of the whole thing, right? Like part of the premise of Spider-Man is also that he's managing his secret identity. It is also that he is, like trying to attend school at the same time. I don't think that's the core part of a wuxia,
Yeah, no, I
superhero
think that's the
film.
real problem, right? Like,
Yeah.
if she is like if she is like the Michael Pena, right? Like, Ant-Man is a comedy movie, like more so than like your typical Marvel movie, right? Like, Spider-Man is also very quippy and it's a little bit more heroic than that, but it still has comedy roots in it, right? Like that's a lot of Spider-Man, and I think you're right. I think Aquafina's character archetype does not work well with what wuxia typically is, or at least like how it meshes with Marvel's particular brand of it, right? Like, this isn't Kung Fu Hustle. Marvel does Kung Fu Hustle. It's Marvel does like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon half, and the
Yeah.
other half is like whatever from Queens, whatever Aquafina's character
Yeah.
was. That
Yeah,
scene
I
she
also
was.
have another small thing that I do want to mention as we are, in like recording deeper and deeper into all of this, right? Which is that I hated how small the ending felt. I had the same complaint about uh Black Panther and Avengers Infinity War as well, where none of these Marvel films have been able to give me the epic scope and like that feel of like, I don't know, the whole thing taking place with like a couple dozen of these monks on like the village or whatever. I was just like, come on, like give me the goods, go big, come on. Like I don't know, that part I felt I was weirdly frustrated about.
Yeah, there were a lot of those. Like there were a lot of little things I think with this movie, right? Like,
Yeah.
we did get my favorite kind of like, oh, we might be evil gangsters, but at least we're humans, right? Like this type of moment. Um, uh, the thing
uh
the thing that really annoyed me though about this, you might think this is nitpicky bullshit, but the start of the fight scene between like the monks and the gangsters is the gangsters pull out crossbows, right? I'm like, why don't they have guns? Why don't they just like shoot and massacre all of these? Like,
I had that,
that's
actually I had that exact same thought. I was like, what? I was like, is that a fucking crossbow?
right.
Because it was before they lit up with like, and I was like, okay, fine, whatever, right? But I was just like, are we really gonna do crossbows?
Right, because they can't have guns because you can't lose your gun bullets. Like at least you can't do it without like, I don't know, a budget.
I
I
mean, they could have
guess.
easily probably said that Dragon Scale was bulletproof. I think that was less
Yeah,
a
I was actually kind of
consideration.
hoping for that. Like, I
This
like I a little sub thing
Yeah,
about like,
you
oh,
don't even need a sub
technology
thing.
and magic,
You
this
need
was
you need to
I don't
cut
think
to
that was a
Wenwu
consideration.
riding into you need to cut to Wenwu riding into the village and being like, all right, remember, men, Dragon Scale is bulletproof, so you have to use the fucking crossbows or whatever, right?
No,
Like
I think they just wasn't explained because it's they like every Marvel movie has to be like what PG-13 or something like that. So they're just like no
there are
guns.
guns in this movie, right? Like that doesn't that's how they fucking like deal with that's how they take revenge on the wife's murderers, right? Like
No, isn't it? That's not how that happens. Does like
he has a
no, I
shotgun.
mean
Wenwu?
he's using the rings.
No,
Yeah,
but
Wenwu
like
just
they
like
have a
straight up goes in
shotgun,
and punches people to death.
right? But
Oh
they
yeah, I mean they have guns in that
right,
scene. Yes.
yeah, like it's not like there are not guns in this like universe for whatever
Mhm.
reason, right? Like
Yeah.
or like in this thing, right? They're a present thing. Just like I don't know, it stuck out to me as being very,
I
very
think the
weird.
problem is that it's still a projectile weapon. If you had shown me these like tech ninjas and they're using those hook things
And
or
that's it.
whatever, and it's like, oh, well, Dragon Scale is bulletproof, so obviously they're not gonna. But the fact that they are using a projectile weapon and it's a fucking crossbow, it's a bola crossbow electric thing, and not just a regular ass gun. I was just like, this is
Yeah,
dumb
no,
as
you know what?
fuck.
I think you're right. I think if they hadn't used the bullets, I might not have noticed that they should have had guns. Um,
Yeah, because like if it's all, if everybody's running into battle and they all have swords, sure, I'm that's perfectly reasonable, right?
yeah, or it's at least like not suspension of disbelief breaking. At least to my level.
I was really sad that all of the little monsters didn't get to do their own thing. That also bothered me. I was like,
No,
oh, a
that would
nine-tailed.
have been worse.
There's
That
like,
that honestly
oh,
would
I
have
don't
been
think so.
worse.
I think that would have been awesome. See, this is part of what I want, right? Like this is like
I think if you
this
had
is the
seen that,
Gonzo filmmaking that I want to go for.
no. So what would have happened in that is you would have seen like all like the whatever the Morrises were. I think they're actually uh what are they called?
I don't know. There's obviously the nine-tailed fox, and then there were those phoenixes, and there were those like gazelle things
Yeah,
or whatever.
Yeah, but like it would have been like a bunch of Morrises like grabbing some like soldiers or like random thing, whatever the demons were, and like dragging them away, and you'd be like reminded of the Ewok scenes from like Return of the Jedi.
I don't
So I
know. I
think
just feel like
They-
if you're gonna go do this like mystical stuff, if you're gonna put in the CGI whatever, right? Like I just want to see more from these creatures. I just want more like imagination on screen. Is what really I'm describing.
I thought the use of like the CGI with like the dragons and the demon was fine. I think
Yeah.
that was like
I
it,
think the dragon came out a little too early, to be honest. I felt I felt like that should have been a bigger moment in general.
No, because
Um,
clearly what they did with the dragon was they have the dragon fighting the demon mirror like the fight between like Shang-Chi and his dad, right? Like that was basically what the character like that was the symbolic big thing representing the small thing.
no. So that part of it I'm okay with. It's that he comes out before the big demon comes out, right? Like I think the dragon coming out to eat all the little demons is too early, right? It should have been the big demon comes out and the dragon come out basically at the same time, and like that is part of the fight escalating. I even
Yeah,
like Shang-Chi
I mean,
doing the dragon ride. That's very similar to like Aquaman riding the kaiju. Just like that's cool shit. I'm on board for the cool shit, I guess. But I don't know, it just came out a little too early. I also felt like Shang-Chi and his father should have legitimately fought in Macau. This is another plot point that I think was really missing. And like I almost sort of felt like it was maybe in the original cut of the film and they got rid of it or something, because the transition from that shit in Macau to them eating fucking dinner, I was just like, what is going on? This guy just tried to like fucking kill all these people, and you're just like sitting down and having rice with him. What? And then he puts you in jail for like no reason whatsoever. I don't know, that all of that I thought was
was
incredibly
expl-
weird and unsupported.
I
it was
think the
explained, but I
having
think
the
they don't think it was earned. Like, sorry, Zach.
Yeah, that's really what I mean. Is that it was not, it did not feel earned. And I think a version of things where Shang-Chi's fighting the one, like the painted ninja guy, and then his dad shows up, and then Shang-Chi fights his dad a little, and his dad whoops his ass with the 10 rings, and then Shang-Chi wakes up and his dad has healed him or something, and he's kind of this hostage prisoner thing or whatever, and he's like, what's going on? That would have more accurately put me in that world, rather than the dad just shows up and calls all of the ninjas off. And I'm like, dude, this
okay,
one
well,
ninja had a
you say
knife
that,
for
but the
Shang-Chi's eye. Like, I don't know.
well, I think the part you were missing was that he didn't call the ninjas off. He already had Aquafina's character and also the sister Xu Xiaoling as like hostages, right? Because he had already beaten them and captured them. So I think at that point, Shang-Chi was like, okay,
Yeah.
And then there's
I
that
can keep
line where he's like,
fighting.
I knew they couldn't kill you or whatever. And I was like, I don't know, that one guy got real close. Like,
Wait,
but
didn't he stop the fight when like Shang-Chi was about to kill the mask guy?
Mm,
oh,
I, I
maybe I don't
I think the
remember the.
Yeah,
important thing was that it was stopped with the fact that Wenwu had already like captured both Xiaoling and
Okay.
Aquafina's character, right? Because that pretty much clearly establishes like you can keep fighting, but I have your friends as, and then that leads to like the hostage kind of feeling where they would go to the dinner and one, it's probably because it's their dad, and two, it's also because like they're in this like hostage. They know that they're in that particular kind of hostage situation as it is. So I don't think that's necessarily unearned. I also like the timing for stuff. I think that is extremely nitpicky. Like I feel like that's just like it's like if you look at this frame with like 2 hours and 60 seconds. So that doesn't work. 2 hours and 42 seconds in, like you see the dragon coming out of it, but then in the next frame, you see that it's a different dragon entirely.
no,
Well,
And
is that it's just that
well, I mean, like, sure, but
the
like, I'm not
progression
saying
of
it's the
that fight.
same, but I feel like it's the like timing of like when the big dragon comes up, not that big a deal in terms of like it didn't affect anything in terms of the plot. And I also don't think it made
right,
things
but it's about
substantively better or worse.
Yeah,
it's about
that's ultimately pretty
storytelling.
minor.
I don't know.
I think that whole fight would have been more climactic if the like the progression, if the dragon hadn't already been out for 10 minutes by the time that, like, because there's the twist in the third act where the big guy gets out or whatever, right?
I think
And the dad
that's
dies.
pretty
If the
well
dragon
established,
I would
had
right?
say
come
that's not
out.
really a twist, right? Like that's like the most obvious Chekhov's gun type thing, right?
So sure. So in screenwriting terms, that is the twist. The third act is all climax, but you pretty much always have a thing that happens in the third act that is quote unquote the twist in the third act.
I
I'm not
thought
saying that it is
Oh,
a
okay, okay.
twist. This is just the name of a phenomenon, right?
right,
You
but
know,
so
An escalation.
Superman shoots the big jet and sucks all the Kryptonians in, but Zod is still there, and then he and Zod 1v1. That's the twist in the third
Okay.
act, right? Even though we all expect that him and Zod are going to 1v1, that kind of thing.
So what I
Anyway,
will say is I think that the appearance of the dragon generally follows the arc of the fight that Shang-Chi has with his dad, right? Because at the start, he he gets his ass kicked into like the literal
yep.
ocean by his dad, and then the villagers are losing to, I guess, like both the Ten Rings people, and then eventually like the small demons that come out, and then he utilizes what he's learned from like his aunt, and that kind of pushes the fight a little bit more balanced, and that's when the big dragon comes out and starts eating the tiny demons, and then the dad shows that no, I am stronger than you, and then the big demon comes out, and then ultimately I think it settles. And so I think that like the timing was explicitly to match the smaller fight that's going on. I think that's fine.
I the same thing could have been pulled off, but you foreshadow the dragon by a minute or two, right? Shang-Chi is floating, the dragon says something in his brain, wakes him up, Shang-Chi gets out of the water, does whatever, right? And is part of the fighting. And then as the big demon comes up, then Shang-Chi summons the dragon, and now we're doing Dragon Ball Z shit, I guess.
I don't think it's that important either. I think it was on this one. I don't think it's the end of the
Yeah,
world.
this is that one's ultimately like
Yeah.
a pretty, that's a pretty minor point. The real thing is that I think Shang-Chi and his father should have legitimately fought earlier in the movie.
I think I agree with you
right?
on that one, right? Like, because then you establish a bit, like, you have them fight, and Shang-Chi puts up a respectable fight, but like ultimately gets his ass beat in, right? And then you do like the this is like Vader and Luke in Empire, and then end of
I was gonna
Return of the
say
Jedi.
it is Orm versus Aquaman in Aquaman, and
God.
then at the end of the movie, he shows up with the kaiju and the cool new trident, and he kicks his brother's ass. But yeah, this is
No,
a very
but I
common thing,
still
right?
think you want,
Killmonger and
like,
Black Panther fight, and
I still think you want the part where, like, when we kick Shang-Chi into the ocean, right? Like, I still think you want
oh
that,
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, I also liked. I actually wanted more. I mean, maybe the trailer sold me on this or whatever. I liked the idea that Shang-Chi was like destined to pick up in his father's footsteps, and he had to sort of like take the rings from his dad or whatever. That was subtext to the fight, which I thought was interesting. And I kind of wish like this is part of like Shang-Chi has like 8 arcs, but like none of them are culminating correctly. Like a version of things where Shang-Chi is like, okay, in order to stop my dad, I actually have to embrace this thing that he wanted from me, which is to take over the 10 rings, and I need to take the rings from him or whatever. But he doesn't want to because he views the rings as evil and this corrupting influence or whatever, right? Like, I think that that was cool subtext, and I wish that it was text to the climax of the film and his character and his relationship, like with his dad. Just because I don't know. I think that's cool. I also think that kind of moral complication is not something that we get like this is something that I think is cool about Aquaman, right? Like the fact that he does a legitimately shitty terrible thing and pays the price for it. The idea that Shang-Chi needs to kind of accept this dark aspect, right? Like of himself and kind of become a little bit of a villain in order to become a real hero. I think that's actually pretty cool, like interplay. And so, yeah.
I don't think the film was trying to like give exactly that message. I think it was trying to be like, like just because you take, like, just because your father is a bad man doesn't mean that everything about him is bad, right? Like, I think that was the ultimate point, which is, I think, slightly different than like having to accept a dark part of yourself. Because like,
yeah, I mean,
the movie
that was
explicitly wants him to let go of the part of him that like killed someone, right? Like he wants him to like forgive himself for that.
Yeah, see, I mean, this is part of what I mean by it's metal, because the thing that I think of is he talks about like, oh, he hasn't taken the rings off, right? The thing when Wu puts the rings away and he has this great idyllic life, but he takes the rings back and now he's hearing voices from the dark, whatever. So the rings have this inherently evil, like corruptive. It's like like the one ring from Lord of the Rings or whatever. I had that sense, and I was like, oh, it's kind of interesting that like Shang-Chi might need to steal this evil artifact from his dad and use that evil artifact in order to accomplish good. Maybe there's something there, but ultimately,
Well, he does at the end, right? Because he takes the rings from his father, and then like the
sure.
demon,
So I don't think
he like punches through with the rings.
I don't think the evil subtext that I was picking up on is really there or like
Yeah,
supported,
no,
right?
I
Like I
actually,
agree with Mango that I don't really think he's adopting he is making peace with an evil side of himself by taking on these corrupting rings. I think those corrupting lines were just kind of there
yeah, no,
and unsupported by everything else.
I think that it was like a really bad way to like explain it. It's like, oh, the rings are from another realm, which is also where these things were. And he's had them for 10,000 years, but they didn't try and break out until like the past past 15 years because there was convenient plot reasons for it.
Tuesday,
Yeah,
3 days from now, right?
Well, didn't
Oh,
they time it with the like was it Qimingjie, which is like the like more or less like a Chinese festival of the dead, or like it's like
right.
the
But they
translation.
say it happens every year, right? Like they could have said it only happens once every 10,000 years. And that would have made sense, right? Like where the village opens up to like
it's
the
the convergence or whatever.
yeah,
All
yeah.
the planets are in alignment or something.
Uh,
But yeah, one last thing I want, since we're headed towards the end of time, one thing that I wanted to say is that at the very end of the movie, I think this is a post-credit scene, right? Like the sister doesn't have much of an arc, but it's basically kind of like my dad was sexist and thought women shouldn't do fighting, and then like the post-credit scene is like her training, like the one we chose with women, and the thing that immediately popped in my mind was like Eric Andre being like, "Do you think Margaret Thatcher had like girl power, right? Like or whatever? It's like just like."
Yeah, and like
Oh,
an actress or a model, she's like, yeah, of course,
yeah, but like it's it's like oh the evil like oppressive gang is good now because there are women in it, right? It was just kind of like I doubt that that's gonna be like the message, but that's the way it came across. So like in that end, it's like
I bust out laughing because you sent me that. You actually, and I didn't understand the context of it. I was like, you were like Shang-Chi's sister. Did Margaret Thatcher utilize girl power when she sent death squads into Northern Ireland or whatever, right? Like that's the joke. And I was like, what? What? I don't get this because I hadn't seen the movie yet.
yeah, yeah.
And so as soon as I saw it, it fucking clicked for me, and I was like, oh god. Honestly, the other thing that I was thinking of is I've been watching Ted Lasso, and there's a bit in Ted Lasso about being a boss ass bitch. And I was just like, is she a boss ass bitch, you guys?
Well, that might be a
uh,
good transition. Zao, did you have anything else you want to say about the movie before we transition into our weeks?
I don't know. I liked it. I thought it could have probably used more runtime. I feel like it was basically like that's a common thing with a lot of Marvel movies. Like they try to do too much and too little for the origin one, at least.
yep.
Yeah,
Um,
I actually think this is like a real problem is that they wanted to do a 3 movie arc, but the Marvel Cinematic Universe doesn't have like the room to do a 3 movie arc for a single character that also interweaves with every other fucking thing that's happening in the Marvel universe, right? Like
well, so the thing is, I think they could do a 3 movie arc, but it's too late in the sequence
that's what I
to
mean. Yeah,
just yeah. Yeah, I can see that.
I don't think
I don't
like
know.
because they tried it with what like Thor, Captain America, and Iron Man, but like Captain America is very disjointed. Thor like maybe right like Thor like they start to go for it. It's like
I
whatever, fuck
think
it, and then like and Iron Man was just bad, right? Like
Iron Man was a good. Okay, so I will say the origin story for Iron Man was good. And they
I
did
agree.
not nail the landing with
No,
Iron
but yeah,
Man
two
3.
and two and three people generally dislike, right?
Well,
I
but
think
so
people would look favorably on Thor Ragnarok and Civil War
I
compared
think
to Iron
people
Man
are
3.
fine with 2. I think 3 is really just the true one that's like people are like, why is
What
this
did I
movie?
have in my hold on, I gotta look at my what
I
did I have in
think
my
three
In
rankings?
the
is my
meantime,
personal
I will
favorite.
say that for those 3 trilogies, I think that
Oh.
Captain America, the first one was bad, and I think the second one was good. And I think only once he became like kind of like a character in the Avengers that it was fine. And then for Thor, literally I had forgot. I had never seen them when they were on theaters, and I only watched them one day when I was just had nothing else to do, and they weren't even available on any streaming service at that time. So it was work to be able to watch those movies, and I would not watch them again. And they're the
Yeah,
same movie
I
twice. It's really
Thor,
annoying.
according to my rankings, Thor actually grows over time. So it's Thor and then Thor 2 and then Thor Ragnarok, which I would not have expected because I like the original Thor quite a lot. And then Iron Man 2 is my favorite of the Iron Man movies. With then it's Iron Man 3 and the original Iron Man. But that's one where I think the movie itself is good. It just bugs me
I think
personally.
I think personally, like what would have been good is if they had established like they more or less got the form correct with Iron Man as like as you have no other prior introduction to the character and you just want to introduce a solo Marvel character, but that only really works with a few characters. Like I think Captain Marvel, if it had come out around the same time as Iron Man, like Buddy would have been like, oh yeah, this is great, or at
Yeah,
least
that's
not as
actually
bad
probably
as it
true.
is. Yeah.
because it was a different time, right? Like I think this is something that people forget, but like Iron Man came out the exact same year as The Dark Knight, right? And I just think that the landscape that we were in at that time was incredibly different. This is part of why I think people didn't connect with Man of Steel, right? Because if Man of Steel had come out in 2008 and alongside The Dark Knight, I think that would have worked better because that kind of fit the overall tone of the zeitgeist. But Marvel movies in those 5 years between 2008 and 2013 pushed the tone kind of in a funnier, more comedy direction. And that means that, right, like these very sincere, pretty serious movies like A Man of Steel are gonna just kind of hit in a different way than they would. And I think that
I
actually
think
kind
that
of culminated and
Well,
comes back
I,
with
well,
I
it.
I
think I
will
think
say
it
But
speaks to like the whole culture of like the entirety of the zeitgeist, right? I think we were moving
yeah.
towards like the like aughts edginess to like Penn's like post irony which I think the Marvel stuff fits in with. Sorry,
Yeah, I
sorry.
mean, I think that here's a crazy one. I think that people might have been better with Spider-Man 3 like 10 years later, right? Because I think the dance scene that everybody memes on, which at the time was this huge, everyone hated the scene, right? But the thing that they hated about it is like they were in this kind of weirdly defensive place about it. Like we were still trying to prove that comic book movies were cool, right? And so an intensely uncool scene in that movie, and I would say that scene is designed to be uncool, right? Like Spider-Man thinks he's being cool, but he's a fucking loser, right? um we just hadn't gotten to a point where like we could accept that kind of joke essentially in one of these movies. And so it's like lambasted. And I think to this day, right, we remember that scene as a garbage, like it's like a terrible thing when really it's just about where the culture was at the time when it came out.
I will say, looking at the actual timelines of like when films came out, past like the big three of Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor, the introductions they had for characters were Guardians, which was very standalone and like both like literally and like figuratively, like within the context of Marvel, was far away from everyone else, so they could do the
Mhm.
introduction. Then there was Ant-Man, which um I think there I still don't remember why they added that scene where Falcon like fights Ant-Man for any other reason other than just to tie it in, but that was
That was the thing that made Edgar Wright quit, right? He didn't want to do that. He didn't want to do that tie-in. He thought it
yeah.
was lame.
Okay, and then the other ones that they had true intros were probably Doctor Strange, which was also like like pretty far away from everything else in terms of like sorcery versus like everything else that existed. And then after that, like the introductions, I think what works for the introduction movies is that if the character is far enough away from any other established character, then it works. And if they're not that far away, and sometimes it's been helped because, like with Black Panther, I think that was immensely helped by the character having already been introduced within Civil War 2 years earlier, which I think probably would have helped. And then Spider-Man's standalone movies, obviously, the same reason. I think this would have been helped by that, but I just don't think there was anything within what they had prior
Striking
that
distance,
would have
yeah.
made
Ant-
this make any sense.
Yep.
I think Ant Man should have shown up in the bus scene in this movie, but that's just because
Yeah,
I'm a Paul Rudd
he
stan.
is just
They're
sitting
both in
there on
San
the bus.
Francisco. How do you not do it? Yeah,
Yeah.
they're both in San Francisco.
Yeah, no,
I mean, there's
I felt
still
like this is he's gonna be the one that like stops like the ultimate crash from happening, right? He's gonna like our hand's gonna come down or something, and it didn't. I was very sad.
I don't think it works quite the same. I think the character you're introducing in this movie has to be introduced in a prior movie to get that boost. But I also don't think there's anything like I just can't imagine like 2 years ago like they just have or 3 years ago at this point they just have like Shang-Chi show up as like someone in Ant-Man and the Wasp. Although apparently
It would be
Slusa
really.
found
Go on, sorry.
sorry, Slusa found I think the guy who does the live streaming from the bus was apparently also within uh Spider-Man Homecoming, I think, or something like that. It's just like a random dude on the street.
Okay.
Uh, so that's the connection. That guy moved to San Francisco and live streamed stuff for a
That
living,
it
I
would be
guess.
crazy if Simu Liu was just like a person on the pier during Ant Man, right? Like, um,
Yeah,
but
I think this movie could have used more like actual runtime, or as two separate movies. But I think that like
Doesn't work.
just within the constraints of the MCU, you have some constraints, right? It has to have that kind of humor that Buddy dislikes. It has to have a clear kind of like plot, and like you have to have something uh, that basically more or less ties it in through like the post-credit scenes and stuff like that. I will say I think that this one is better than a lot of the other ones, just because I think even though Buddy disagrees on the arc, I think that the arc was better, and I also think that the villain was better. I think that's definitely something that um, Marvel
Yeah, I
movies
feel
have a
like
terrible time actually landing, and it's like hit or miss with what the villains are
yeah, I feel like
good.
the villains have been getting better over time. Like a lot of the modern, right? Like Killmonger obviously is probably the best
Yeah.
one, but I love Ego. I think Ego the Living Planet is a great villain. Um,
They keep killing them
maybe
though.
those are the two of them. Those are the only two
Yeah,
I can
the
think
big problem
of.
is they keep killing all the good villains, right? Like
Yeah,
they don't let any of them survive to like
Except for
fight.
Loki. Loki's great, and he's around forever.
maybe one day I'll watch the show.
You should watch the show, actually.
I have like begrudging plans to watch Falcon and the Winter Soldier and Loki. I just like
Yeah, no, honestly, I feel like I would have watched Loki if if Winter Soldier hadn't come out. When Falcon and the Winter Soldier, because that show is like I really don't care that much about this one, but I feel like I should watch it before I watch Loki.
Yeah, that is actually exactly how I feel. Oh my god, yes. I feel like I can't do them out of order like that. Even though I watched two fucking Marvel movies, right? That are theoretically
I feel like,
after I don't know.
well, it depends, right? Because like you're gonna have to watch Falcon and the Winter Soldier because that's gonna straight up tie into the next Captain America movie
Oh
whenever that
goody.
comes out. Because like,
I'm so excited.
because you've seen you've seen like the I mean, you know from the comics that like uh
Yes,
well, like the
we
title
all
also
know
gives away, right?
that like that Sam becomes the Captain America.
Yeah.
Well,
So
no, I mean, the funny thing is, I actually don't think. I think the core premise of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier is it could be either or, because both Bucky and Sam in the comics pick up when Steve Rogers puts the thing down. So I think the question for like Twitter or whatever, that like Kevin Feige is like, oh, and then they'll speculate whether it's going to be Bucky or Sam who gets the thing, and then they give it to Sam because Anthony Mackie is a bigger movie star.
well, I will also say that if you watch
That's
those two,
definitely the reason.
sure. But if you watch those two specific series, it's not too out of order because I think they plan on having back Black Widow before Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Okay.
Um, and so you'll see that. And then I don't know. I think Loki is just fun to watch. I think
I mean,
it's
we're definitely getting a lot of them because it's also November is the Eternals, right? Which is like the
Yeah, and
next other
also
one.
that's
What
not a
If has
series.
been
That's a
happening.
film. That's
No,
gonna
right. I just mean that like Black Widow, Shang-Chi, and the Eternals
Hey,
are
yeah,
condensed because of COVID.
yeah.
don't forget about Venom. I'm so
Oh
excited for
my
Venom.
god. I am weirdly hyped for Venom Let There Be Carnage, like, which is great. I like Venom is a bad movie, but I had such a great time.
Yeah, no,
And I just really wonder if they could capture that magic in a bottle again.
I hope
I
they
think
can.
you'll watch it and then you'll be like, this is fun for
I
some
mean, yeah,
parts.
it's in a couple of weeks, right? Well, so hold on. What's
My,
this?
my fear is that it's gonna be like Ant-Man and the Wasp, which was like they tried to rebottle Ant-Man, it didn't like it felt a little too forced. I think that's gonna happen with
Yeah.
Carnage, or that's my fear for Carnage. I'm hoping for otherwise, but
I will say now is also like for I think the streaming series are worth watching, and but now is like a lull because they have What If instead of like canon stuff until they get to Hawkeye, which will be canon, I guess.
Hawkeye,
Okay,
your
yeah.
eternal
So we have
nemesis.
the Many Saints of New York coming up. We have Venom coming up.
Excuse
We
me.
have
It's the Many Saints
Dune
of
coming.
Newark.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, the Many Saints of Newark.
I have
Honestly,
to
that might
watch
be the one
fucking
I.
Sopranos. God
Oh
damn
my
it.
god, you have to watch the entirety of The Sopranos. We have No Time to Die.
Dune.
Wow, that one is also pretty quick. I thought that was November. It's in
You have No
October.
Time to Die. You have Many Saints of Newark. You'll
Have you
have
seen? Have you
Dune.
seen? Did you see the trailer for The Last Duel?
The
In
last.
when you, it played in front of My Shang-Chi. It's this. It's a Ridley Scott movie starring Ben Affleck,
Oh
Matt
yeah,
Damon,
yeah.
and Adam Driver, and I want to watch it so bad. It looks fucking awesome. It's like these two medieval knights are dueling over.
Matt Damon and Adam Driver are gonna duel with
Yeah,
swords.
yeah. And I'm just like, get. put it in my eyeballs, right? Like this is the kind of thing that I was just
You
like,
also have Dune and then The Matrix 4 at the
Dune.
yeah. So
end.
Dune, The Matrix
Apparently,
4.
Dune's only the first half of Dune.
Really?
That's what I have heard that the Dune movie is the first half of the original Dune book.
Interesting. Okay.
Anyways, and then for the so catch up on the streaming stuff. I think you'll need it for some of the later, not for Eternals because I don't think it'll matter for
Yeah.
that.
So
But
Eternals is November 5th. Oh my god, are we gonna do the new Ghostbusters movie? I didn't even know that was coming out. Man, they're just like
Scott Paul
they're
Rudd.
just shoving all the movies into
Yeah,
the
no, I was
back
gonna say
half,
like
you
we
know?
have not done a lot of games this year because there's just so much like media, too much media.
I know.
well,
I need
you
to
did
play all
Humankind
of.
like 2 weeks ago. What are you talking
Yeah,
about?
that's
but-
true. I need you to play all of Pathfinder Kingmaker, please.
Oh,
I'm
God.
like
Oh
not
my
even
God.
halfway through, or maybe I'm about halfway through. I just hit level 10.
I played Kingmaker the actual game, so I'll leave that as it is.
Yeah, I have 63 hours played in Pathfinder Kingmaker, and I'm halfway done. I'm not even I'm not even finished with that.
Anyways, the other important ones include Miss Marvel, which is coming out late 2021, and Moon Knight, which is coming out
Oh
sometime in
my god!
2022.
And then Spider-Man is in December. Fuck!
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
Wow.
Spider-Man No Way Home,
Spider-Man.
December. That one's gonna be good. I feel like. I
Yeah,
feel
the
actually.
thing is, so the other thing about that is that we also want to do a Matrix retrospective of the Matrix movies. Long-time listener Jimmy told me a long time ago, he was like, if you guys do the Matrix movies, you have to have me on the podcast. I was like, absolutely, 100% I want to do that. And we've never.
I feel like we should pull Monik in for that one too if we can, because Monik is a big Matrix fan.
Is he really?
Yeah.
Interesting. That is really interesting.
Did any of them play
I
The
have very
Matrix Online?
complex feeling. Ooh, that's a good question. I have very complex feelings about the Matrix sequels, and so I'm very excited for that podcast.
I do find it funny that like some Twitter user was like, so like Morpheus is not in the trailers, and
I mean,
Lawrence
person that-
Fishburne is famously.
I was gonna say like the person that is supposed to be Morpheus is in the trailers because there's no way they put like
Yeah, well,
a black, bald black
so
guy
Lawrence
with, like,
Fishburne was
those
not asked
glasses
back.
in.
Yeah, well, Lawrence Fishburne was not
Yeah.
asked back, and like some Twitter user pointed out, like it's gonna be so hilarious when like these normal people find out that canonically Morpheus died in the Matrix Online, like a year or two, because like when they released that MMO, they said it was canon because it was working with the Wachowskis, and as part of the plot, like Morpheus just gets like killed by like some random dude through a window as he's
Oh my
trying to
God.
like blow up like the Matrix to wake everybody up. I actually at some point just
The
got
Animatrix
curious and
is
read.
canon too, isn't it?
I suppose, but like that's a prequel usually to the
Right,
main
yeah.
Matrix movies. But the
Or, like,
Matrix Online is
sideways.
supposed to be a sequel.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
you read the like at the end after they like shut the game down, they release like a storybook of like all the plot points, and it starts with like some stuff that relates to the movies, and then you can clearly see when the developers turned over to another set of developers, because then it becomes extremely in-game kind of lore. It's like this corporation is now fighting this corporation, and then blah blah blah, and it's like it has nothing to do with the main Matrix plot at all, and then it ends with basically like I don't even remember. It was I would like that time of my life back basically, but yeah, so Morpheus canonically is dead if they respect the MMO.
And John Wick 4. Which is another movie.
Is that going to be different than John Wick's 1 through 3? To be honest,
Probably not. And I should rewatch 1 through 3 now, so that way I'm depleted enough to enjoy 4.
did you watch Nobody?
I did.
Oh, I didn't watch Nobody, but you did, right?
I did, and I didn't think
Yeah.
it was that great, but I thought it was fun. I like
Rest in pepperonis. I almost watched it on the plane, but I watched Pitch Perfect instead. Do you guys know that Pitch Perfect is like one of my favorite movies? Do you guys even know this
is that
movie
the
is?
one where J. Jonah Jameson screams at the drum kid?
No. So first of all, that is another
That's a different,
very, very
it's a
good
whole
movie.
different movie.
Pitch Perfect is an a cappella musical about like a college student who goes to college and like and joins the a cappella group at her college, and she like convinces the a cappella group to sing cool mashups of pop songs rather than like the 80s classics, because she's cool and all of the lame a cappella nerds are lame. And I'm explaining it derisively, but the movie I think is literally perfect. There is not a thing I
Is
would
it
change about that film.
Pitch
It is
Perfect?
Pitch Perfect. It is one of the best scripts I think I have there like talking about Shang-Chi, right? Like there are these small moments that are justified with these like incredibly tight attention to detail like inserts. I'm just like, who thought of this? Who is the genius that made this movie Pitch Perfect? There's a whole thing about okay. There's a whole bit, right? Where it's called the riff off. And the riff off is when like the acapella groups are all showing up and they're riffing. They're, you're supposed to do something live. They choose a category like live, and everybody is like, everybody has to like sing for it or whatever. And they're competing against this other group. There's this all boys group, and the boys are mean, and they're mean, stinky boys or whatever. And at the riff off, there's this moment where she's very the main character, she's disengaged. She's only doing this because she's made a deal with her dad, right? If she joins a club on campus, she can go do whatever. And so she's uninterested. She's really apathetic about the whole thing. But then, it's like going, and she gets into it, and she starts singing. She starts rapping, actually. No Diggity, the Blackstreet song. Do you know that song?
I know the
And
song
she
No
gets the
Diggity.
whole, yeah. And she gets like the whole crowd into this thing, and it's this real moment of like culmination when she realizes, oh God, I kind of like acapella, and I'm kind of good at acapella or whatever. And it's like the dumbest thing, but it works like gangbusters for me. I don't know why. It's just like, it's a good movie, you guys.
Well, if we're doing movie hot takes, I will say that I don't think Waterworld was as bad as people say it is.
What movie?
Waterworld.
The reason that I watched Pitch
You-
Perfect
Have
actually
you seen
was
Waterworld, Zhao?
because you've never seen Waterworld, Kevin Costner?
Oh, no. Oh, sorry. I heard Wonder Woman. Because
Oh.
your
sorry.
mic is a little quiet on my end.
Sorry.
So it's
Yeah,
like,
I remember,
what? No,
we
who
watched,
is saying that Wonder Woman's not good?
We watched Waterworld in college, though I don't think I got a good. We were mostly just memeing the whole time. Like, I
I've
didn't even
seen
really
parts
remember
of
the
it. I
plot
haven't
of it.
seen the whole thing. It's
But
too long of a
yeah.
movie to see the whole thing.
Yeah,
To be
the
honest.
reason that I watched Pitch Perfect is because Ben Platt is in it, and he's the
Oh
Dear Evan
yeah.
Hansen guy. And I was like, oh, I gotta, I want to see what he's done before. And I was like, oh, he's in Pitch Perfect. I might as well load this up. And then I watched it. I was like,
So,
it's so good.
have you watched that owl film that Zack Snyder did that everybody memes on?
Oh, the Owls of Ga'Hoole. No, I really want to. I know that Patrick H. Willems is making a Zack Snyder Owls video. He had that as his Patreon goal for a really long time. He's like, if he gets to 4,000 patrons, he's gonna make a Zack Snyder video. And just who knows on Zack Snyder. And the fans got really into it, and they really wanted to do it. So they reached that goal, and he was like, "Joke's on you. I'm doing the Owl movie." So when that comes out, I'm gonna be very excited.
What I don't understand is like people keep making fun of Ben Platt for looking too old for Dear Evan Hansen, but he
He has
looks
a
like.
baby face. He looks perfect for it.
Oh, I mean, I think it was based on the trailers where it's like
Yeah.
because of his haircut and like he looked like he was clearly like an adult man trying to play a high school teenager, like more so than you would see from like a regular one of those movies. And it's just like people were making fun of him for that. I don't know. I've heard of also Anna Kendrick is probably the biggest star who was in Pitch Perfect at the time, and then
Yeah.
Rebel Wilson became a bigger one from that.
That was
And
where Rebel Wilson came from. I didn't
yeah.
realize that at the time, but yeah.
Anyways, we've gone from Shang-Chi to
So we've got
Pitch Perfect.
We've got
Yeah.
7 minutes left. Zhao, how was your week?
It was fine. I played a bunch of board games, which were fun. I think I haven't been gaming a lot, but I did play the first like 20 minutes of Skyrim for the first time, and I think that I
For the first time?
yeah, I never played Skyrim until like
Todd
yesterday.
Howard just like popped a boner. Like,
I mean, I think it's okay. The combat mechanics are a little awkward, and I don't know. It's
I have not played Skyrim in a long time. Though I think Skyrim is a truly great game. Like,
yeah, but
it will stand the test of time, as civilization suggests.
I think the thing is mostly just that, like, having played like Breath of the Wild first, I would like if I had to choose, I think I would
Sure.
rather just play Breath of the Wild versus this. But I haven't played Skyrim, so it was fine. I played it for a bit. I'll probably go back to it later. The end.
What board games have you been playing?
Uh, we actually played a few like short card games. So one is called Bees, where the premise is basically you are you're like rolling. It's a dice rolling game in real time where the goal is to build a honeycomb, and you build a honeycomb by rolling certain dice that you can place on top to collect them from you and your neighbors. It's mostly just fun because everything's bee themed, and you have to. The instructions say you have to shake the dice with both hands as if you are a as if you are a beehive shaking like bees in your hand. Um, then there was another one called like Deep Sea Adventure, which is just like it's a quick game where you're trying to roll dice to go down to pick up treasure and then come back up. But as if you pick up treasure, you start using oxygen, and you and everybody else in the game has a collective tank of oxygen. So once people start picking up treasure and then turning back, oxygen depletes really quickly, and it's a goal of balancing how far out you go versus whether you come back with any like points at all. And then a train game, which is just like build trains and buy stocks. That takes like 10 minutes.
Or is it not? Is that not Ticket to Ride?
No, it's a game called like Mini Rail or something like that. Uh, Mini Rails. On Board Game Geek, it's rated 7 out of 10.
Ooh. Um. Well, will use that as an opportunity to talk about my week because I have had an eventful week. Part of which was I played some games. I went to Gen Con for a very short period of time, for reasons I will explain later. But I played a big mega game. We pretended to be. We went with friends of the show, Nick, Mark, Enoch, and Alex. We played a mega game where we were in space. Nick and I were the captain and the warden of a prison ship, and we got up to some shenanigans, and that was fun. And then we played the other game managed to play was the GI Joe RPG, which was
Whoa.
super neat. The person who was so it's not released yet. We were essentially like beta testers, I guess. They're doing the company's doing a Power Rangers game, a Transformers game, and a GI Joe game. And the Power Rangers one is out, but the other two are not yet. The person who was running it was really into it, and she brought her like 18-year-old son's old GI Joe toys to the table for us to like. She's like, so you had them in boxes, and then after we sat down, she's like, okay. Like she's like, nobody opened the boxes, and then when we started, like everybody opened the boxes, just like GI Joe sitting inside of it, which was awesome.
That's cool.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
no, it was
Man, there's a Power Rangers game?
yeah. So
There's a lot of
Wow.
tabletops now.
I was a really huge Power Rangers fan, like when I was a kid. I like most people I think fell off after Mighty Morphin, but I just like kept secretly watching Power Rangers.
do you
like,
know about the whole like Saban's thing? Like
well,
so.
I know Hayam Saban owns it and is like a shithead.
Well, he's a shit. So the thing is like it's like a mashup, or it's like it's you know how like the more famous version or other version of this is like companies like fucking with like Robotech as well, but like it's a Japanese series. I forget what the original name is, but like the high school kid interstitials are all like they're all added in post. And like they obviously they dub over the audio. It's very easy because they're wearing masks, but like
oh yeah, because they get the footage. It's Sentai, right? Like
Sentai. Yes, that's
Super
right.
Sentai. Yeah, they dub over all the footage. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
No, apparently Saban's just like an enormous shithead.
If you have 20 hours, you can go view there's a YouTuber called Linkara who has like the history of the Power Ranger series, so you can spend the rest of your life watching those.
it is a fantastic series. He actually just put out a new one that I haven't watched yet, like
Oh yeah.
Wild Thunder or some shit, right? Like
all the names become the same after a while, especially the themes. Yeah.
And the other big thing I did this week is I have moved. I have bought a house, and that's been like a fucking nightmare. So you know, in many ways, it's great in other ways, but that is why I haven't been playing a ton of games lately. Is I've been trying to deal with all of that bullshit. But I will have hot tips on how to like repair sinks for our viewers in the future.
So
you should include some links that you're promoting.
We're gonna become a home repair podcast.
Yes, as was always my goal, right? Like this is what I've always wanted, was to embrace the weekend warrior mindset. I guess I don't know, buddy. How was your week?
You know, I have been trying my darndest to finish this Pathfinder game. Like I said, I have 63 hours, which is actually pretty impressive given that I only picked it up like 2 or 3 weeks ago. But let's see. Hold on. Let me take a look. Let me take a look at my achievements and see if I can see when I got my very first achievement, which I think I got there's like an achievement for completing the tutorial. All right. So the tutorial mission, I completed the tutorial mission on September 4th. And then it is now September 20th, and I have 63 hours played. So that's a lot of hours in this Pathfinder Kingmaker, which is like incredibly addictive. There's something about managing the whole party that feels really nice, right? Like being able to like really micromanage. It's like, when you're in D&D and you're trying to convince someone to do a thing that will benefit you, right? Like, no, flank this guy with me. And they're like, no, I'm going to charge the archer in the back or whatever, right? Like being able to just like make sure your guy always flanks with you is incredibly satisfying. So I've been playing a ton of that because I want to get to Wrath of the Righteous, which I am excited / interested for. I'm excited in and interested for excited for because they have a bunch of extra classes in the game, and I want to sort of try some of them out just to see how it like how it feels. Pathfinder Kingmaker has a lot of classes, but it doesn't have like the full gamut that the later games do. So yeah, I guess that's where I live.
Awesome. Does anybody else want to talk about anything else that they've done with their weeks?
Nothing except I've also because this is a tabletop gaming podcast, I kept seeing ads on Instagram for like an Avatar tabletop RPG.
Oh yeah, I've heard about that. They kickstarted like $1 gazillion.
Yeah, I
for
was
it.
like curious, like there's no way people would really want this that much. I was like, people would want it, but not that much. They raised $9 million on Kickstarter, which
Yeah,
is
wow, geez.
frankly a lot.
9 million? Really?
That is
Yes.
a ludicrous amount of money.
I didn't think that
Yeah.
people. I would have told you that would have funded. I didn't think it would have funded for $9 million.
Well, I
That's-
mean, come on. Worst case scenario, look, anything that's on Kickstarter that is not Star Citizen is going to be good. In terms
That
of
is not
meaning,
true. That is
I'm sorry,
absolutely not
in
true.
terms of in terms of how much it's funded relative to whether a product is delivered.
Yeah,
I don't think that's true either.
What was the Castlevania guy? His game sucked, right? Didn't everybody fucking hate that game?
No,
that he made?
the Castlevania game was good. Bloodstain was good. It's the Mega Man.
Oh, okay.
It's the Mega
Oh
Man
yeah,
game
that's
that
what I'm
was
thinking of. The Mega Man game sucked. Yeah, they
Mighty
got
Number
Kickstarted
9,
for like $10 million.
everybody
Yeah, but that
knows
one
that.
at least came out,
I don't
whereas
know, I
Star
haven't even seen it,
Citizen
but-
is never gonna.
Yeah, I mean, I think
release.
Star Citizen is like the greatest joke played on mankind, but yeah.
Yeah.
So do we all think that Star Citizen is a scam? Or rather, let me clarify. So I don't think Star Citizen is a scam. I think it's like somebody who got too far over their skis. But I don't think it's ever coming out. What do you guys think?
I think Star Citizen might come out. I think Star Citizen might come out when it actually needs to make money again. I earnestly believe there are people who are working on Star Citizen like right now. Like I don't think it's that much of a scam.
Right.
I just think it's a scam in the terms of like it'll never deliver on all of the promises made.
Yeah, I think it started out as like something they could meet in like 10 years at the worst. And then what happened was that as the money came in, they like basically pledged more things. And now they're net like it would probably take them
Yep.
the rest of their careers to finish Star Citizen at this point.
I agree.
Um
Yeah, I don't think anybody at Star Citizen, or I don't think most people at Star Citizen, the guy in charge included, is attempting to cheat people out of money. I think he's just, tried to do too much.
There are parts of the game you can play. It's just nothing like relative to what they're saying is a complete game. They're never going to get there.
Yep. Especially they've promised like very weird things, right? Like being able to like model and change like the music in your like spaceship or something like that. Like it's like what if you gave like a 15-year-old like told them to describe the perfect game, like that, this is what you get out of it, right? Like this is like
Yep.
You could when they say model and change, what is that? Like you can make music in the spaceship?
I think it was supposed to be like like that, like you would collect discs and those discs would be like objects that you could like see, like you would pick up and physically put into a jukebox. I might be,
Oh my god.
I might be misremembering this, but like it's it's
That's just going to be another way they're going to monetize. It'll be a new music store in Star Citizen. You just cruise around and buy a U2 album or something.
U2 album by yeah, something like that. All right, well, we've gone over time. And there's no sense in just shitting on Star Citizen anymore, I don't think.
All
With that, I'm going to wrap it up. If you would like to share with us your opinions on any of the things we talked about in this movie, you can email us at subdersplaygames@gmail.com or podcast@subdersplaygames.com. You can follow us at twitch.tv/subdersplaygames, where these go out live. You can subscribe to us on YouTube and SoundCloud and rate review us on iTunes, all that good stuff. You can give us money on Patreon. Zhao, is there any other social media things I should be pushing, given that you are the official social media manager of Derps Talk About Games?
You did Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, and Twitch. So that's pretty much it, unless you want to start an Instagram and or TikTok, which I do not want to do.
Okay. Well, Zhao, is there anywhere that people can find you that you would want them to find you?
Just the internet.
The
Search for
internet?
Alex Zhao. It's you'll find me.
Really, that's it? You just search for Alex? Does that actually work? Will people?
I mean, you'll find. I mean, like if you type that into like Twitter as like the handle, that's enough.
Oh wow, you have your own website, alex-zhao.com. It's got
Yes.
your face. It's got your face in the middle of it. Very
Yes.
cool.
nice.
All right.
Yes.
And buddy, you have anything you want to promote?
I have nothing else I'm looking to promote.
Well, in that case,
Oh, I do want to promote
Oh,
one random
go for it.
Simu related thing.
Okay.
Go on YouTube and search Garbage Boy Aquafina, and then I think it's humorous. I don't know if you'll find it humorous. That's it.
Sure.
All right, so do that, folks. I'll maybe put a link to it in the description if it isn't too terrible. With that, I'm going to say until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners.